going to borrow a term that Alfie Kohn uses where we just put those two words together and it's basically one word, tests and grades. Because I don't really differentiate between the two, and neither does he, and I think that he's onto something. So I'm going to share some stories today, and I'm going to share a little bit of what some of the research says, and I'm hoping to inspire some of you to rethink some of the stuff you do in the classroom, particularly around assessment. Quick story to get going. A principal friend of mine was telling me about a story, an experience she had with her daughter on graduation day. Her daughter was going to be graduating from high school, and her daughter had gone through French immersion. So they were driving together to the grad ceremony, and the principal, the mom, looked over and saw this huge smile on her daughter's face, and that made her smile. And she said, "You know, honey, you look really happy." And she goes, "I am, Mom. I am happy." I said, "Well, why are you happy?" I said, "Well, it's graduation day, Mom." Well, and she says, "Yeah, I'm so proud of you. What's the happiest thing about graduation day?" And she said, "Well, I'm so happy because after today I won't have to speak another word of French." I don't know how that doesn't break your heart if you're a teacher, let alone if you're the mother, right? So she's both. I'd like you to actually turn to a neighbor and take 1 or 2 minutes, and I'd like you to just to share. What do you think? What does that story make you think of? Where did you think I was going with it, and then where did it end up? And are you okay with that? Take a minute. So you're in a French immersion school, and you're seeing some kids who are there under coercion or they're compelled. Many. So they're not falling in love with the language, they're not falling in love with the learning. They're there for different reasons. And I'm picking up based on your tone that you're not okay with that. Okay, yes? Burnout, tell me what you mean. Sure. So burnout, they've been doing it for a very long time, and for whatever reason, they've come to the conclusion that it's been too long. Okay? Yes? I think we can, there's one potential there is that she's been learning this, but it's not been relevant, or she doesn't know how to connect it to her life and why it would be meaningful. That's been missed, right? Which is, I think, disappointing because we would hope that after 6, 12 years that at some point someone would have helped her connect those dots. But I think we can agree, unfortunately, that too many kids, no matter the subject matter, and I'm not just picking on French immersion, that just happens to be what my story was, but you could put any subject there. And I think we would agree that too many kids are going through kindergarten to grade 12, and they're coming out at the other end, and they're kind of done with it. The most exciting thing the thing they're happy the most about is that it's done. Did anybody get into teaching for this reason? So that kids could just be finished with learning? I didn't either. So we have to look, it is extremely easy to blame the kids for this. We could just be mad at that daughter. The mother could be very, "I'm so disappointed in you. Why is this your opinion?" We could do that, but I don't think that would be a good use of our time. I think we need to look in the mirror. We need to look at the system, because I don't think this is one individual problem. This is not a character problem of one teacher. There's a systemic problem here that we need to address. We created her. We created this attitude. So today I want to take a look at, I want to poke and challenge where this attitude of, "Thank God I don't have to speak French anymore," might have come from. My Twitter's there, my email's there. Feel free to email me and ask me. And I have teachers all the time ask me, "So you suggest we don't grade anymore? Are you nuts? You don't have any tests. How could you possibly do that?" So I'm open for people to email me, and then on my blog right now, I have my slideshow. My Prezi is on my blog right now, and I have a couple links there that supplement my talk, including the chapter from a book I co-edited titled "Detesting and Degrading Schools," and my chapter is titled "Reduced to Numbers: Moving from Concealing to revealing learning. So I'm a teacher, and I think this is really important that I am a teacher, because too often when it comes to school reform and changing school, teachers are left on the outside looking in. They're either ignored, or they're shunned, or they're silenced. Teachers need to be the drivers of educational reform, not the driven. But then that means we have a responsibility to speak up and be well read and well researched in our craft, because we need to be professionals. So I want us to stand up and say, we're going to take control. I'm not speaking at a healthcare conference right now because I wouldn't know what to tell doctors and nurses. Now, this doesn't mean we should ignore authors and researchers and people who don't teach. They have their place, but we have to keep them in their place sometimes and remember who's doing the work. And so I've been doing the work for 15 years. This is my 15th year of teaching. I've taught 10 years in a middle school, teaching mostly grade 6 and grade 8 language arts and science. I've taught, of course, if you teach in a middle school, you're going to get a dog's breakfast of subjects over the time that you teach. And so I've taught other subjects in other grades, 6, 7, and 8. Then I spent 4 years teaching in a children's inpatient psychiatric assessment unit, where children were admitted through the emergency room via a psychiatrist. And that was extremely an interesting time. I enjoyed my time, but the compassion fatigue working with children who have a number of mental health problems and home problems, because 9 out of 10 of those kids, their biggest problem is they're being marinated in abuse and neglect. And then they wind up with a mental health problem. They weren't born with it. It was created. And now I'm currently back into a middle school teaching grade 6 and grade 8 language arts and social studies. So that's some of my background. And I think this is important because I don't just write about and speak about teaching, okay? I'm actually teaching. So I'm not just telling you about it, now saying, go do it. Like I'm going to go back to school on Tuesday after the long weekend, and I'm going to do what I'm talking about. And I think that's important because sometimes, and I've caught myself listening to somebody talking about something that sounds idealistic or utopian, and we might catch ourselves going, that's impossible. And so today, before you say that any of this is impossible, I just want you to know that on Tuesday I'm going back to my classroom to do it. Okay, so I'm not saying it wouldn't be difficult in your circumstance to maybe do some of this, but it's not impossible, because there are teachers who are doing some of this, and I'm one of them. So I don't just have something to say. I'm doing the work, and I have something to say about it. And more teachers need to blog and tweet. Okay, I actually find it kind of fascinating. It's really neat to come to these events, and because I don't think I'm that big of a deal. I mean, I just tweet and blog and I share my story, right? But so many teachers don't, that I look different than so many teachers, and I shouldn't. If more teachers tweeted and blogged, that would be a good thing, because more of us would tell our story, so that the public actually knew what was going on inside of our schools. Yes? Is there any what? Yes, there is. Yeah, you have to be smart about this. If you just go into this blindly and think that this is going to be all hunky dory, you would be foolish. And I have written about some of the dangers and some of the things to be proactive. So checking out my blog at joebauer.org, and if you go to the tab called Abolishing Grading, or on my blog right now, you'll see that my Prezi's there. But also below it, I have a link to my chapter, and in my chapter, I do talk about some of the things that we have to do this properly. Because if you jump into no tests and no grades and don't have an authentic alternative that is very visible and transparent for parents and administrators and people to see, we have to still provide assurance. Okay? So I have alternatives, but if those alternatives are not clear, you're going to have people going, well, of course you don't like tests and grades, you're lazy, you're not doing anything. You have to be able to make it very clear what you are doing to make the learning visible. So in 2006, I had been teaching for 6 years, and I was sick and tired. I was ready to quit. I was very, very disgruntled. I I was extremely frustrated and tired of assigning homework to kids, and the same ones did it and the same ones never did it. It didn't matter what I said to them. It didn't matter whether I threatened them with their lives or not. It didn't matter how big the carrot was that I dangled in front of them. I was tired of marking for hours at home on the weekends and in the evenings, devising these diabolical rubrics that were somehow going to save my career and did not. And I've soon quickly found out that rubrics are part of the problem, not the solution. And I was tired of marking them, giving them a grade, putting all of these rich comments about how the kids could do a better job, what they did well, and what they can improve on, only to find them the rubric and the comments laying on the floor. And some of them didn't even have the audacity to crumple it up. They didn't even touch it. I mean, at least crumple it up so that I could say, well, you know, it was in your hands for at least a moment. Instead, this is what I find. I was becoming very disenfranchised. I was losing purpose. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing all this work? And then this is what that's my result. So I had many conversations with friends and family, and I had to choose between quitting or changing. Not just complaining about the kids, because that wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to add to my misery. So then I changed, and I did a ton of professional development. I remember that I just started Googling, like, schools without homework. I was desperate. Learning without grades. Like, give me something. Give me some alternative to what I'm doing right now. And I came across my first Alfie Kohn article called The Costs of Overemphasizing Achievement. And I read it, and I felt like I got hit by a truck. I was like, this dude is onto something. Because inside of his article, he laid out some of the reasons, some of the things that happen when we grade students. Look, teachers are good people. We love teaching. We love working with kids, because if you don't make it. So you don't last long. But if you're going to teach for a while, you have to enjoy what you're doing, and you have to do you want to do what's best for the kids. We are good-intentioned people, but there's a good old saying that said that the highway to hell is paved with good intentions. We have been doing some paving. We need to see what we've been doing. Because when we grade kids, the research is telling us that learning becomes a chore. I'm seeing some head nods right away where kids come in and the whole point isn't to learn. I'm here to get that grade. And then let me get out of here. The Game of School is a great book by, I think it's Robert Fried. I might have got that wrong. But the book's called The Game of School. And it's almost like the teacher and the student exchange winks. And those winks are a silent agreement that says, the teacher says, I will pretend to teach you, and the student says, I will pretend to learn. It won't be very fun, but we'll get it done with, and we'll both go our separate ways. That's not the school I want to work in, and that's not the classroom I want to create. The research tells us that children, when they are graded, value ability more than effort. Right? They start looking at external things are why I'm smart. I was lucky. That's why I did well. The teacher doesn't like me. That's why I didn't do well. Instead of looking to themselves, they look to external factors. Anybody familiar with any of Carol Dweck's work around mindsets, fixed and growth mindsets? Grading leads us down the path to a fixed mindset. The research shows us that kids will avoid challenging tasks. I'll put it as simple as this. This is a really important project, okay? You've got two options. By the way, it's worth 50% of your mark. This one looks eerily similar to a project you've done last year, and for some weird reason, you still have it at home. And this one is something that you've never even conceived of. It's an idea you've never even played with. In fact, it doesn't even make any sense to you because you didn't even know that that thing existed. Which one are you going to choose? Alfie Kohn would tell us that kids are not being lazy when they make the decision to choose the project that they've already done, that they could just go home and change the date on it and resubmit it. They're being rational. It makes, I mean, we all probably did it. I did. I have a few examples that I'm not going to share with you today about what I did to game the system. And then we also know that kids think less deeply. And here's the example that's happened to me too many times when I gave multiple choice tests and it's been 10 years since I have given one, is that the kids come up to you and say, well, how come I only got a half mark here? I want the full mark. Why are we talking about that? We should be talking about whatever the test was about, not about penny pinching over the grades and where's my half mark? Well, how come he got a half mark? Do you see how shallow and superficial that is? And yet we're enamored with it. We're driven to distraction when it comes to these grades. And when I say we, I don't just mean the kids. We are doing it too. Teachers, the system, parents, administrators. When children come to depend on having, or get addicted to grading, that they fall apart when they fail. And here's the kid that I'm talking about. 97? I wanted 100. Now, the worst thing we could say to kids is that 97 is good. Stop saying that. You're actually making the problem worse because you're reinforcing the idea that the purpose of going to school is to collect grades and that you should be happy with 97. Instead, we should be talking about, well, did you learn anything? Did you accomplish anything? Are you proud of anything you did? No, that's a problem. I don't care whether you got 97 or 7. We need to stop emphasizing the grades, whether they were high or not. I don't care. The problem with grading is that too many children have come to the conclusion that that's the reason why you go to school. Whether the marks are high or low, I don't care. So the day I abolished grading, I want to share you this story. I was teaching language arts and science to the same group of grade 8 students, and I was integrating the two subjects. So I decided I was going to teach the particle model of matter through an essay. We were going to write an essay, and I was going to teach paragraph writing, how to write an introduction, how to write a conclusion. We were going to talk about complex and compound and simple sentences. We were going to talk about the 5 elements to the particle model of matter. We made a metaphor, STAMP, so STAMP, not a metaphor, sorry, an acronym. So S was spaces, T was tiny, A is attraction. You're with me? So I had the kids, so we did all this, and they wrote their essays. And then this was right around the time where I was disgruntled, and I found the Alfie Kohn article. And the next day, I came back to the classroom I was jacked. I had such an awesome idea from this Kohn article that I was going to show up the next day. And as far as they were concerned, I should have been marking their essays. But I came into the room and said, guys, kids, I got some great news for you. You know those essays you handed in to me? I'm not going to mark them. I was the only one smiling in the room. And all of a sudden, almost like the entire room, in one movement, every kid in the room threw up their hands and said, "What? You mean we did this for nothing?" They would have liked to have thought that what they just did and said would be evidence that I had made a mistake, but it was quite the opposite. Their reaction confirmed for me that I was on to something and that I was not going to mark these, and we were going to address this right now. Instead of grading them, the quick answer, and I have more answers coming, but the quick answer is just the feedback. You just give the kids the information they need to get better. One of the quotes that I use to drive my assessment and teaching practices and my parenting practices, because I have 2 children at home, Sawyer is 3 and Kaylee is 7, in French immersion, by the way. So that story kind of hits me too, is that children should experience their successes and failures not as reward and punishment, but as information. That's from Jerome Bruner. Jerome Bruner, an American psychologist. Children should experience their successes and failures not as reward and punishment, but as information. So I use that to drive how I'm giving feedback back to the kids. I don't care whether you're giving 97%, B, check marks, smiley faces, or maybe you're breaking the kids up into red light, green light, or maybe you're identifying them as birds. Some are blue jays and some are magpies. I don't know what system you've devised, and you're probably very, very proud of it. Any grade by any other name is still a grade. You're still reducing everything that is so magnificently messy as learning down to a single symbol. And when you do that, you always conceal far more than you ever reveal. You are hiding the learning behind the symbol. So we got to stop doing that, and we got to start using more anecdotal feedback to tell the kids what they've done well and what they can do to get better. A B does not do that. So I actually think there's no good reason to use tests and grades, and I'm going to go through some over the years, because it's been 10 years since I've made this shift. I just actually did the math this morning, or yesterday driving to Calgary. I was like, how long have I been doing this? I couldn't believe it. I haven't been using tests and grades for 10 years. That even shocked me a little bit. I didn't realize it was that long. So there's no good reason to grade, and I want to go through. Some people will say, well, we have to grade because I got to get the kids to do things. I have to motivate them to get them to do anything. Otherwise, they'd show up and they'd do nothing. Well, first of all, what a depressing view that is of children or people in general. So unless you're a misanthrope and you actually think that people are evil and will never do anything, in that case, I'm not so sure you should be a teacher. I think we need to shift that mindset. Kids, Sawyer's 3. I don't need to motivate that boy to do cool things. He's going through the kitchen cabinets and he's finding pots and pans and throwing them down the stairs just to find out what they sound like. He's not doing it to tick me off. That's not his motivation. He's not out to get me. He's learning. And he's learning because he loves it. Kids are born that way. I believe that. And if you don't believe kids are born learning to love, I question again whether you should be teaching. Because I think that mindset will lead you to do things in the classroom you shouldn't be doing. That doesn't mean some kids don't show up and are very difficult to educate. I saw them in the hospital. But you know what? Those kids wound up in the hospital not by accident. There's a reason they were there. And many of them would rather tell me to F off than learn. But that wasn't a natural response. It's a natural response to abuse and neglect. You show me a kid who doesn't want to learn, and I'll show you a kid that has something going on in his life that's convinced him to be like this, and it's not healthy. Motivation, we got to stop asking the question, how motivated are our students? It's a bad question. Here's why. It implies there's only one kind. You either have a lot of it or very little of it. That's not what science tells us about motivation. There's two kinds, intrinsic and extrinsic, and they're inversely related. And the real snappy part of this is that if you raise one, you decrease the other. That's the inverse relationship. You could read about this in Daniel Pink's Drive. Anybody read the book? Know what I'm talking about? There's a great RSA video with Dan Pink talking and then somebody on the whiteboard. Alfie Kohn's book, Punished by Rewards. Edward Deschai's Why We Do What We Do. I believe that motivation is a critically important topic that teachers need to understand better. It's not just a sidebar. I think it's at the heart of what we do. Because of that French immersion story I told you at the beginning, nobody in this room was okay with it. She finished grade 12 immersion. Isn't that good enough? The looks in the room told me no. We wanted her to want to do it, not just say it wasn't good enough that she did it. We want them to like it. That makes our jobs so much more difficult. Wouldn't it be easier if all we cared about was that it just got done? But it's not true. So we can't use grades to motivate, because I don't care whether you're in college or kindergarten and why we would be grading kindergartners, but it's happening. It makes me sick to my stomach. But whether you're in college or kindergarten, there is only one way to experience a grade, and that is as a reward or a punishment. It's the only way you can experience it. Yes?
I'm hearing a reoccurring thing that the students need to be engaged, but how much of that has to do with the choices we give them? And they're not adults, so we feel we have to make these choices for them. We're not really giving the chance to make choices.
Alfie Kohn, I quote him a lot, and I read a lot of other people as well, but my career has been inspired by much of what he's written, and then I'm putting it into practice. But one of the great quotes he has is that children learn to make good decisions or choices by making decisions and choices, not by following instructions. For too long, we're just instruction givers. And then, a good education is you do what you're told. And then we wonder why we wonder why people don't vote. Could it be that school, traditional school, is the most undemocratic place on the planet? And they've been in training to not live in a democracy at all? And then we have the audacity to complain about them, when they graduate and they're not active as a democratic citizen. Well, what have we been doing in school? Where's the democracy being in school? We could probably do a better job of that. Rank and sort. People will say, well, we have to rank and sort these kids. We got to figure out who's conquering who. Who's at the top and who's at the bottom. You know, maybe at some level of education, you could make an argument that this is a must, but I don't think it's in K to 12. And if it's in grade 12, it's not in K to 11. Do we really need to be ranking and sorting elementary kids? I don't think so. I'll put it this way. We could give the system everything it wants, and we could put all of the children into their categories. There's the A's, there's the B's, there's the C's, done. We could give the system everything the system wants and never give anything the children need. That's where the system's needs are trumping the children's needs. Stop it! If we really are doing this for the kids, then we got to stop justifying bad practices because that's just the way it is, or the system needs it. Well, you know what the system needs? Is for you to be a professional and say, no. So when I hear things like David Berliner talk about how kindergarten teachers in the States refuse to give a standardized test, and one of them said, I'm not doing it. And her employer said, well, then we're going to fire you. And then, so then another kindergarten teacher heard about this and said, well, actually, excuse me, I'm not going to give it either. And then more and more teachers said, I'm not going to give it. And you know what happened? You know how many of them got fired? None. You know how many of those kindergartners wrote the test? None. They withdrew the test. Feedback. People will say, well, I have to give grades because the kids need to have some feedback. I've addressed this a little bit. Grading is an incredibly primitive form of feedback. Okay, so I could look at you sitting there, and I could say C on your sitting skills and your listening skills. Okay. So the only thing I'm going to do is either inflate or deflate your ego, because the only way you can experience grading is as a reward or punishment. You have no idea what that C means. But here's what's dangerous, is that some people think they know what these things mean. And this is what's funny, is that some communities have tried to move from percentages to letters, or letters to percentages, or percentages to birds. And the public goes, what are you doing? You can't change the system. I knew what those meant. I don't know what these birds mean. Well, they're kind of right. When they say that, they're saying we're used to, we're familiar with those other grades. But if I ask somebody in this room what's the difference between a 68 and a 69%, somebody's in here, some smart aleck is going to say 1%. But and that's as extensive of an answer as you're going to give me. The only grades I know the difference are 4950, pass fail, 7980, and where I'm coming from, that's honors or not honors. But these are arbitrary marks. They don't mean anything. We're just used to them. Yes? I had a parent come in one time for parent-teacher interviews. This was early on, before I was just starting to make some changes in my teaching career, and they said, what's the class average? I didn't know I didn't have a class average, but I thought I'd have a little fun. And so I said, 60%. I don't know what it was. And the parent said, oh. And I could see them doing some mental math. Well, that's good. I said, well, why? Why do you say that's good? Well, it's lower than what my child has. So my child's above average. Wouldn't it be great? I mean, really, teachers, you know, if you were doing a better job, all kids would be above average. Did you hear what I just said? If you're averaging, you're marking on a curve, and you don't even know it. Because if you have an average, somebody has to be below average. Somebody has to be below average. And God forbid, if you give everybody 100s, now you're just being too easy on the kids. You see this mindset we have? We have to have failures to make some people winners. Is that a public education system? So then I told the parent, well, just so you know, actually, I'm glad you're happy that your child has a higher average than the class average, but just so you know, this is the dumbest group of kids I've ever taught. You see how meaningless this can become? Now, I then quickly said, just so you know, I'm not teaching dumb kids, and just so you know, I have no idea what the class average is. But do you see what and then so I was trying to work the parent through what had just happened, and they were like, yeah, I don't know why I got so hung up on that average, because you kind of made a point there. The last reason people will say they need grades is for preparation. Well, we got to prepare them for the future. Post-secondary, my kid's going to college. My kid's going to university, and good for you. Do you guys know what fraction of Albertans go to post-secondary? 10%? 5%? 20%? I think it's around, I think a third would be a high number. 2/3 don't go. They don't go to post-secondary. So, think about that for a minute. We're basing our public education system on expectations or an end goal that the majority of Albertans won't do. So who's the system for? I thought we were supposed to have great schools for all children. The other thing is that there's a real movement, particularly in the U.S., and we need to be extremely careful not to go down this path, where people are saying this nonsense about, college starts in kindergarten. They need to be college ready. Sir Ken Robinson would look at you and go, that's bollocks. Kindergarten starts in kindergarten. Do we really need to talk about this? But some people have got it in their heads that and we become obsessed with this, chasing this preparation. Even if we have to prepare kids for post-secondary, seriously, how soon would we have to do that? God, I would hope it wouldn't be kindergarten, elementary. I would argue, I hope it's not middle school. I hope that it would be at least just the last couple of years in high school. Yeah.
We have junior high parents coming in and trying to figure out how they can get a transfer into a better high school in the city.
Yeah. And more, what we're seeing in the States is the resegregation of schools. Resegregation in a couple ways, between race, white and black, but also in socioeconomics, rich schools and poor schools. So this is a great comic that I found, and I really like it because I think it really puts into perspective how little things have changed. In 50 years, a lot has changed in school. 1961, there's the parents grilling the child who's quaking in fear. And the parents are saying, what's the meaning of these marks? And the teacher's got a smug look on their face. 2011, what's the meaning of these marks? As the parents grill the teacher now, and the kid has a smug look on his face. I don't care which one you think is funnier or which one you'd rather. I don't want the system, I don't want the education system to be like either of those. No system will ever succeed when someone is shaming someone else and someone else has a smug look on their face like that. I say tests and grades were originally tools used by teachers. We created these. We invented these tools. But like Marshall McLuhan, the great the communications guru, once said, we first shape our tools and then our tools shape us. Tests and grades are tools we created, and at one point they served us. But I now believe that teachers are not slowly, in a very fast way, are becoming the tools that are being manipulated by tests and grades. And some teachers are going, I don't like that. Well, how do you think the kids felt? And didn't you remember experiencing this in school? Research says that 3 out of 4 adults were once children. So, can we not remember what it was like? What replaces tests and grades? I want to talk about some alternatives. My quick answer is this. Projects and performances collected in portfolios, 3 Ps. Now, it can get more complicated than that, but I could end my presentation and say, go figure out what that means. You know, back in the old day, they had science fairs. Kids did stuff for real. And then they met at the local, at some farmer's barn, and they had a barn dance, and the kids showed off what they were learning. And the parents were like, they're learning. They didn't need report cards. They didn't need to log in to the school's website to look at the kids' grades online. I actually think there's a huge problem with online grading, because I think it's actually sabotaging the relationship between parents and schools, because I think many parents are like, hey, I can just log on anytime I want. I don't even need to go to the school. I don't even need to meet the teacher. It's actually building barriers that are already large enough between schools and their community and schools and the parents, and it's actually making things worse. It's actually pulling us apart. A question from Ermeli Helenen. The Alberta Teachers Association, I'm extremely proud of the work that our association does. Did you know that half of the ATA's budget goes to professional development? Like, that's impressive. And I don't know the number, but the amount of time, effort, and resources that the ATA puts into research, our own research, is phenomenal. The reason why it's called the ATA, yes, it's a union, but it's an association too, which actually is a quite unique situation. And I think it works wonderfully, despite how some people will attack it and say it doesn't work. And there might be some things that need to be addressed. But that we're doing the research and the PD that the ATA is doing is remarkable. And I say this because they brought the Finland partnership between Alberta and Finland is remarkable. And we've sent people to Finland. Dale, high school principal in Edmonton, has been a huge part of that partnership. And the Finns have come here. And we're trying to learn from each other. Ermeli Helenen was at the time, I'm not sure if, I haven't seen her any time recently, this was a few years ago, in charge of curriculum in Finland. And we were in Edmonton, and I was listening to her talk about how Finland does school. You know what? I don't want us to become Finland, no more than I want Finland to become Alberta. Let's just learn from each other. And then we'll adapt to what our own context is. So she's talking about school, and at the end I asked the question. I thanked her for her presentation. I said, Ermeli, I have a question. How often in Finland does a teacher have a grade book where the children's names are on a spreadsheet, and on that spreadsheet at the top are all of the homework, quiz, attitude, and then in all of the cells are averages. And then at the end of the term or reporting period, how often do Finnish teachers take all those averages and then average them together to get a final average to put on the report card? Silence. She's staring at me. And then she said, I don't think I understand the question. So I, thinking, okay, she just didn't understand my English, so I just talked louder and slower. And she's like, da-da-da-da-da. I understand the question. We don't do this in Finland. She said, in North America, you're fascinated with quantifying everything and reducing everything to numbers. We don't do this. We don't do this. In fact, in Finland, they don't grade, for the most part, until grade 6. Elementary is like a grading moratorium. And she said, because we don't want the kids competing against each other. We want them focusing on the learning, not on the ranking and sorting of each other. And then she said something that was wonderful and summarizes assessment up for me in such a wonderful way. And she said, assessment is not a spreadsheet, it's a conversation. I don't know how else to put that. It was wonderful. Because simultaneously she tells us what we shouldn't be doing. We should not be doing spreadsheets and bar graphs with the marks and the tests and grades. And then she tells us what we should be doing. We should be having a relationship with the student and a conversation with the student. In realty, it's location, location, location. You're familiar with this, right? In education, it's relationships, relationships, relationships. Tests and grades rupture relationships. They pit us against each other. Consider printing that off and putting that on your desk or on your door. Or even the Bruner quote, children should experience their successes and failures not as reward and punishment, but as information. It's just, it's a reminder. Assessment is not a spreadsheet, it's a conversation. Yes? Well, you know what's ironic about that is that it's paradoxical. And I have a blog post about this that I would love for you to take a look at if you're interested. They're best known for the worst reasons. PISA. But if you look closely, that's not why they're great. They have equity and they have high quality. And we're going in the other direction. David Berliner and Pasi Sahlberg talked about this a lot yesterday, about how Canada, our inequality and inequities in this country and this province are going the wrong direction. 1 in 7 children live in poverty. In the States, it's 1 in 4. In Finland, it's 1 in 30. You know, I mean, those things matter. So the answer to your question is, the world found out about Finland because of PISA, and that's the least interesting part about Finland. So if you really want to know what makes Finland great, stop talking about PISA and read Pasi Sahlberg's book, Finnish Lessons. Yes?
I'm just curious on how Finland universities accept that students.
Grade 12, they do have a test that the kids write, and then it gets them into some kind of, you know, direction when it goes to post-secondary. But not every kid writes it. Only the kids that need to. Only the kids that want to. Yes? Sorry. What do they do for testing or figuring out for, you know, tracking into post-secondary? They do have a test in grade 12 that some kids will write to figure out where they're going to go for post-secondary. So the answer isn't, there isn't none, but it's there, but it's used tactically. It's not used as a shotgun on everybody. Yes?
I just want to say that just sounds so beautiful because it's putting responsibility and onus on a student from the get-go, even to going into university. If they want to write it, or if they've got the confidence and the wherewithal and the knowledge of themselves to be able to direct themselves, you're saying they don't have to, and that's beautiful.
The whole purpose of education should be getting kids to become self-autonomous. Art Costa has a wonderful quote that I reflect on all the time, and it goes something like this. He says, "We must constantly remind ourselves that the entire reason why we assess and evaluate children is so that one day they could grow up and assess themselves when we're not there." There's nothing more embarrassing than a person who thinks they're really good at something and they're not. Think American Idol. But this is the second part to Costa's quote. For too long, we've been assessing to the exclusion of the children. We're doing all the work. Well, no wonder we're good at assessing. No wonder they're clueless. We're doing everything, we're doing it all. We shouldn't be working harder than the kids. I remember when I was having the kids self-assess, because this is part of my answer. If I had no grades, what the heck do you do during report card time? Which was the question I emailed Alfie Cohn in a panic a week before I had to have a report card. I have an answer, and I'll get there. But I remember Rachel's doing a self-assessment, and she's doing this self-assessment, trying to reflect on her own learning, figuring out what evidence of learning she's most proud of, but also what parts of her learning did she make mistakes on but learned from. And then she said, she put up her hand, called me over. "Yes, Rachel." She said, "Mr. Bauer, I think I've figured you out." I said, "Oh, great. Write it down and then give that to my wife." I said, "Okay, tell me, Rachel, what have you figured out?" "You want me to think about my own learning. You want me to self-assess myself. You want me to look at all of my work and figure out what I'm most proud of and what I've accomplished." I said, "Rachel, you nailed it." "Well, I don't want to do that." "You should do it." And then I had to say, "I'm so glad you were honest with me, Rachel, but the answer is no. I'm not doing it for you anymore." Yes? You know what? Screw them. Who says that they should dictate what K-12 does? We don't get any money from them. No, I'm being mean. But the point is, we need to take care of ourselves and figure out how we best educate children while they're with us. We need to be developmentally appropriate. There's whether you like the middle school movement or not, let me just say, in principle, I liked it because it was an acknowledgement that junior high children are not just miniature versions of their future selves. If you've ever taught 10 to 14-year-olds, they have extremely unique needs when they're 10 to 14. And thank God they don't have those needs when they're 15 to 18 anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, I love teaching grades 6 to 8, but it's a unique place. And I'll say that because you show me a teacher who transfers out of a middle school, and I'll show you a teacher who never comes back. They'll go to elementary, they'll go to high school. Very rarely does a teacher ever leave elementary or high school and go to middle school, or leave middle school and back. There's probably some outliers, of course, but I think there are exceptions to the rule. So that tells us that those kids at that time, just like kids at any time, have unique needs, and we have to be developmentally appropriate for the kids based on. So to say that we need to meet we shouldn't be meeting post-secondary's needs in K-12, we should be meeting the children's needs. That's how I would frame that. The root word to assessment in Latin is assidiare. Assidiare literally translates to English to mean to sit beside. I find this kind of curious. Really, assessment means to sit beside. I'm pretty sure that when whoever came up with the word, what they weren't implying was having 500 children sitting in a gym, alone in a crowd, writing a standardized test beside each other. I don't think that's what they had in mind. That's why assessment is a conversation that has to happen between the teacher and the child, the teacher and the student. To sit beside each other, reflect together, learn together. And the teacher would, challenge, poke and prod to get to expand the child's mind, artfully guide the child to do things or think about things they would have never done on their own. So the question might be, how do I put a mark on the report card if I have no marks? Because I don't have a grade book. I haven't had a grade book in 10 years. I haven't given a test in 10 years. And the only time my children receive a grade is on their report card. So what I do is I have three answers. First of all, in my district, I did go through the policy, and nowhere does it say that I have to have a grade book that has a whole bunch of averages that I have to average together to come up with a final average. I'm not a mathematician, but something sounds fishy about that. I don't think that works. And we know it doesn't. Because if you're a mathematician, especially if you're a mathematician, you should know better. Smarten up. So what do? Well, I don't reduce them to numbers. I have three things. Portfolios. Remember I said projects and performances collected in portfolios. And you know what? Some of the best stuff kids do in school is too big to hang on the fridge. Because it's a thing. Like when kids ask, what did I get? We should be able to point at something and say, you made that. That's what you get. Isn't that better than me saying B or A? That's what you get. You made that. So if you're in shop, you made something out of wood. Be proud of it. No, there's not something else. That's what you get. So portfolios, and I call them working portfolios. They should not be show portfolios. They should not be laminated. And the teacher shouldn't make them. They're going to look messy. They might just be a manila folder that collects stuff. Or it might be online. I've used wikis. I've used Nings. I've used blogs. I've used all sorts of things. Pictures, videos, blog posts, which are just it's just another word for writing. And that's what the kids are sharing. My students all blog, and they're all public, grade 6 and 8. And we write every day. And sometimes the kids have choice, and sometimes they don't. And then I told parents during parent-teacher interview, I said, don't bother wasting your time going on Power School. It's a waste of your time. Don't bother, because there's nothing there. If you want to know what your kids are learning about, if you want to know what your kids are doing, go read their blog. Yes?
Question with blogging. Are you insisting that your students use academic language and write in text language?
Yep. Because if you're texting, I tell kids I'll never tell you to not use texting stuff. I do too. Time and place. And when you're blogging, that's not what we're doing. We're not texting. We're blogging. We're writing, and we're in school. So that's how we write. Then, after portfolios, and they can come in any shape and form, judgment. I spend a lot of time with the kids. I don't have a teacher's desk. I threw it out. So when you come into my room, I've forced myself to not be allowed to sit at my desk because I don't have one. So guess where I have to be? I have to be with the students. So when you come into my room, sometimes it's a little hard to find me because I'm sitting with somebody at their tables. We have no desks. We're all sitting in tables. The kids don't always have to work together. There's enough tables that kids sometimes do have, independent alone time, and that's good. And then they can collaborate too. But you come in and you have to look for me, and oh, he's working with that kid. Okay. But I have to get to know the kids. And then my personal judgment, my professional judgment of the kids matters. And then the last thing is I have the kids self-assess. Because when I emailed Alfie Cohen saying, dude, you had me at hello, but what the heck am I going to do? I've got report cards due next week. I've loved this no grading thing. I know my kids so well, but I have to put a grade on the report card, and I'm not prepared to be fired over this. I have to meet this requirement. And I would never tell anybody in this room to ever get fired over this. There's ways of bending and being creative with the rules, but please do not walk out of here thinking that Joe said, I can go back to my school and break my board's policies on things. That's not what I'm saying. Okay? There's ways of doing this very artfully and creatively, and you can still receive your paycheck at the end of the month. So the kids self-assess, and so Alfie Cohen replied to me saying, okay, Joe, bring the kids in on it. That was his answer. Bring the kids in on the process. You can reduce the damages of grading by involving the kids in the process. So I have a good idea what the kids should probably get, but I ask them first, and then I have to decide whether I agree or disagree with them. And then I got to figure out which battles I want to fight. Early on, the kids would say, they'd pick, like, we were on percentages, so then, from 0 to 100. Chances of agreeing isn't good, right? So 82, they said. And I was like, you know what? I agreed that your honors, that's what I had in mind. I would have probably given you an 80. You said 82. How about we just not fight about this? Just take your 82 and go home. Now, if a kid said 92, and I was thinking, oh, geez, I mean, dude, you're scraping by. You're probably closer to a 52. Now this is a conversation. This is American Idol. The kid's on American Idol singing, he's terrible, and he thinks he's great. This is a learning opportunity. He's just told me that he can't self-assess very well. And I do have to tell kids, all jokes aside, I need you to be serious about what you pick. Okay, good. But some kids don't know how to self-assess, and they grow up into being adults who don't know how to self-assess. This is a problem to be solved, not to be punished. So I have to sit down with the kid and talk about why it's not a 92. And we will look at their stuff, and we will compare it to other stuff. And I'm not trying to beat them over the head with this, but I'm trying to get them to see why they're not at a 92. So then my professional judgment can trump the kids, what they say, but I have to bring them in on the process and talk to them about that. I can't skip that step. And Art Costa's saying, for too long, we have been skipping it. And then the kids never learn how to do it. But we're really good at it. In the end, the French immersion story brings us to the end of where I want to go with this. This session was about degrading and detesting, and I tried to lay out some of the pitfalls of grading. So I tried to say why we shouldn't, and then I do have some alternatives that I've tried to lay out. Projects and performances collected in portfolios where we provide just the feedback. We're not rewarding and punishing, we're just providing the feedback so the kids can get better. I think that if we did some of this, school would become more relevant for the kids, because instead of filling in bubbles, they'd be doing projects and performances. And I think that if we stopped grading and we gave feedback, the kids would actually figure out what they're good at and what they need to get better at. And then when they're riding in their car with their mother to graduation, hopefully the response from the child when the mother says, "Why are you so happy?" will be, "Because, Mom, I've been doing French for 12 years, and now I get to do it for the rest of my life." Thank you. So 9:45. Let's open it up. I would like to hear from some people that have said nothing first. Yes. Yes. So I'm going to repeat your question. How do you do feedback? What are the different kinds of feedback? And how much documentation? We must be very careful about documenting. Paperwork is the monster that eats good teachers alive. Seriously, you could document all day and never teach. Wow, that's the most head nods I think I've ever had from a crowd. I think I hit something on the head there. So we have to demand from ourselves, just like I throw out my teacher's desk, you've got to figure out what you're doing in your day, that you've got to stop. We need to professional development should be about making two lists, a to-do list and a to-stop list. So figure out what sinkholes are driving you nuts, because that's what I did in 2006. I decided tests and grades were driving me nuts. I decided homework's driving me nuts. I decided rewarding and punishing kids was driving me nuts. So stop it. Because that's what's wonderful in good and bad ways. Some of the best teachers go back to their room, shut their door, and teach their children. Some of the worst teachers go back to their room, shut their door, and teach kids. Isolation can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it allows for innovation to happen without permission to do things, right? And sometimes isolation can lead to abuse and neglect. So it's complicated. Different kinds of feedback. Here's one. I try to guide my verbal and written feedback for kids. I comment on their blogs. But I sit with them and I talk with them. I give them verbal feedback so much. And here's how I guide it. 3 steps, roughly. One is, just observe them. And then say, what did you see? Judgment-free. I see that you have one gigantic paragraph of death in your blog. We have fun calling it that. And they go, oh yeah, because nobody's going to read that. Because one gigantic paragraphs of death don't get read. People go, ew, I'm not reading that. And that's not just kids, adults do it too. So I'll say, I see you've got one giant paragraph. And then you know what the kid will turn around and say? Hang on, you come back in a minute, Mr. Bauer. And I walk away. And I come back, and magically, there's more than one paragraph. I didn't have to judge them. I didn't have to rank and sort them. I just observed something. And then the kid was like, oh yeah, I didn't notice that. Go away. Okay, I'll come back when you're ready. So that's first, no judgment, just what you see, what you hear, just an observation, okay? For too long, we have thought that teaching requires judgment, and it doesn't. It doesn't. Any basketball fans in here? Do you know who John Wooden is? Quick story. 2 university professors wanted to study John Wooden. John Wooden was considered to be one of the best basketball coaches in college history. Over 3 years, they had an 88-game winning streak over a 3-year period. Out of 12 years, they won the championship 10 times. Now, and the list goes on of these wonderful things that this team did. Now, no question, John was coaching some good athletes, right? Often coaches are only as good as the athletes in the room, and sometimes, especially when it comes to standardized test scores, teachers are only as good as the students who are in the room. And you tell me how much education the mother has, and you tell me the zip code they live in and what tax bracket they're in, and I'll tell you what score they're going to get on the test. Because that's what David Berliner and Patsy Solberg talk about how socioeconomics is the dominant factor when it comes to test scores. Back to Wooden. They were studying him. They wanted to know why he was such a good coach. So they actually observed him. But then when they went there, they sat in the bleachers. And John didn't do anything. He just walked around. He didn't give team lectures. He didn't stand on a soapbox and praise the best players and punish the lollygaggers. He didn't send them for wind sprints. The only thing that he did is he tended to just go up to his athletes while they were doing something, and he would say something for a momentary part of time, and then he'd walk away. So the observers, the professors who were studying Wooden, were like, well, we have to go down and find out what he's saying. Because, I mean, it looks like he's doing nothing. So they started a chart. They wanted to chart what Wooden had been saying. And they charted it by saying how much of what he said was reward, and how much of it was punishment, and how much of it was neutral. Over 80% of what John said to his players was just information. No judgment. No reward, no praise, and no criticism. Fascinating. So I don't know whether John Wooden and Jerome Bruner ever went for a drink, but they seem to be drinking from the same jug, because children should experience their successes and failures not as reward and punishment, but as information. Yes?
You use judgment in two different ways here. So I understand what you're saying right
Okay.
now, and I understood what you were saying.
Okay.
So you said here three ways we have portfolios. You want to talk about your evidence, your my judgment with respect to
Yeah.
the response.
That's right.
So I'm just wondering how that my judgment is.
So my judgment is, come report card time, there is a game we have to play. And I have spent 10 months with the kid by the end of the year. Sometimes that hasn't been enough time, and sometimes that's been too much. But I know, I kind of know, I've been in school long enough. I did it, I went to school for 12 years. And I remember what it was like to play the game of grades. And so I kind of have an idea where the kids should be. And that's my judgment. I'll go, well, they're probably around a 62, I guess, or they're probably around a C or a B. But I wait for them to tell me first. And then, that's right. I'd rather not do it. And I certainly don't use it all year. The only time I use it is during report card time when we have to come up with something. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Just wondering, given the power differential in education, how much support is used over time? Because you said it's been very isolated.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so the question was, how much support have I experienced, and how much support have I not experienced from administrators? This is a very dangerous topic, but I'm going to address it, because if I don't, that would be setting some people up in here for some failure. You've got to know who your administrator is, because at the end of the day, if your administrator is going to make your life miserable over this because they love provincial achievement tests, and you better have your own provincial achievement tests in your own room with a regimented grade book, you've got a problem on your hands. I might question whether you want to work in a school like that. Maybe you do, but you got to know your administrator, and you need to be open and honest with them. I remember Mona Knutselen was one of my first principals. I would fall on a grenade for her. I really would. She was remarkable in helping me develop and formulate these ideas, because I used to be a bully of a teacher. I yelled at kids. I punished them. I rewarded them. I gave loads of homework. So, I mean, my beginning teacher, Joe, would listen to this and go, that guy's full of it. I have had principals who are supportive, and I've had principals who are not supportive. The ones that were not supportive made my life hell. And I ended up moving schools a couple times. And the rest I'll tell you over a beer. So be well read if you're going to do this. Talk to your principal. Be open and honest. Try to get support if you can. But you need to come across intelligent about this. You can't just say, I'm just going to not test and grade anymore. You've got to be able to outline a bit of an argument why you're going to move away from it, but then you've got to replace it with something. Because if you don't replace it with anything, then I agree with the administrators and the public who are saying, you're not giving me anything. Heck, I'd rather test and grades rather than nothing. You have to assure me with something. That's why the projects and performances collected in portfolios will assure people. Because in the end, I would say, would you prefer to see your children's projects, performances collected in a portfolio, or do you want me just to give you a B and you didn't even have to come into the student-led conference? It's kind of a setup question. I'm not being fair. But the parent would say, no, I'm glad I'm here. I want to spend time with my kid. Does that... Yeah, it gets more complicated than that answer, and some of it would be, I'd have a hard time addressing it other than talk to your administrator, be very transparent, and be well-read. Start with reading my chapter that's on my blog, joebauer.org, and read my chapter. The link is there underneath my Prezi. You can read it for free. And read Alfie Kohn's article, The Case Against Grades. The Case Against Grades. Yes? Yep.
In Alberta, we actually do this to an extent. It's just that we do it in our special education.
Yeah.
I'm a special ed teacher in high school, so for me, like,
You could be giving this presentation because you've been doing it.
not to the extent.
But I mean that, and I agree with you. The question was, we're doing this in some parts in Alberta, including special education.
And I was just going to say that for the part where I'm doing my assessment, for me, this is what we're doing, but I use skill task analysis. So instead of actually getting a grade or anything, and I have the conversation with the students, but we go through and it's like, whatever we're doing, whether it's math or laundry or whatever, it's, can you do this on your own independently? Do you need my help? And is this something that even when you have my help, it's just you're not getting? And then throughout the course of the years that I have them, I've improved. I've moved from not being able to do it to being able to go with some help, to being able to do it.
So to summarize, sounds like you've developed a self-assessment guideline that you want your students, there's certain reflective questions you want them to answer about what they learned. And this is important. John Dewey reminds us that we do not learn from our experiences. We will learn from reflecting on our experiences. That's why the self-assessment is so important. We have time for one more. Yes?
I wanted to ask about the self-assessment piece. I teach grade 1 and 2, and I usually give them the rubric and they put the smiley face for whatever grade they
Yep.
look at. But usually they overestimate their
Yeah.
abilities, and I'm just wondering how I can effectively do that.
So the question is, I'm a grade 1 teacher, I give lots of feedback, but some of the feedback sometimes is they're choosing smiley faces or whatever to show kind of where they're at or what they understand. And too often the students in grade 1 have an inflated sense of themselves. I guess I got a couple answers to that one. Number one is, I'd rather an overinflated sense in grade 1 than an underinflated. So I'm not so sure how big of a problem this is. Although we want the kids to learn, we don't want we don't want grade 1ers walking around with heads like this. So that's the first part, is make sure that this is really a problem. Because kids in grade 1, they should be very proud to go to school and be happy with themselves. But I don't think that's quite what you're saying. You want the kids to reflect and to want to get better and learn. Okay, so take the smiley faces off, I would suggest, and because I think it's distracting. I don't think you're ever going to get them to choose the right smiley face. But I think you could get them to focus on what they're actually learning. So let's pretend that they were doing a little science experiment and they were, instead of using the chisel, they should have picked up the hammer because it would have been a better tool to use. I'm making this up. Talk about what could they have done differently. Well, instead of the chisel, I could have used the hammer. Well, why? And get them to talk about the learning. I think the smiley faces and the marks and whatever symbols you're using, the magpies. I've seen people, labeling kids birds, or red light, green light. Sometimes these things are actually getting in our way, and they're distracting us from actually talking about the learning. So that would be my advice: is try getting rid of the smiley face for one. Just try it once, and just talk about what it is you want them to actually get better at.